Purdue Pharma, the makers of OxyContin, a painkiller at the very center of the opioid crisis, are reportedly trying to make a deal to settle thousands of lawsuits. Of course, we're covering this story very closely this week after that massive court ruling in Oklahoma against Johnson & Johnson for their role in the opioid crisis. Carolyn Dunn is in our bureau in Washington. What is the latest? This is obviously not going to end in Oklahoma. What are the new developments here in the opioid crisis, Carolyn?
Definitely not. And brace yourself for these numbers, because what's being reported is a potential settlement, or a tentative settlement of between 10 and 12 billion US dollars, which is about 15 billion Canadian. And what's remarkable about this is that the Sackler family that actually owns Purdue Pharma privately is apparently going to have to get away from the company, just give it up, and pay $3 billion US out of their own pockets just to make sure that they are not sued personally. Now, the majority of the money doesn't come from their own personal bank accounts, so it will come by putting Purdue Pharma into Chapter 11 bankruptcy and creating a company that would be called a public beneficiary trust. And that would mean all of the profits from the former Purdue Pharma would basically go back to the plaintiffs, including for any opioid sales. In addition to that, they would be setting up a new company, and any kind of addiction drugs or overdose drugs would have to be given to the public for free. And this would be basically to try and settle with all the states and the communities that are suing. There are more than 2,000 outstanding lawsuits. Of course, Purdue is sort of seen as creating the seed of the opioid epidemic here in the U.S. because its drug OxyContin basically started the whole mess. And so this would be really quite the landmark settlement if it's passed.
I mean, they are eye-popping numbers, both in terms of the dollar figure that we're bandying about here and also just the sheer number of lawsuits, more than 2,000. Many people have sort of equated it with the big tobacco master settlement that goes back to the mid-1990s. How far away are we from having that kind of a settlement again, Carolyn?
Well, reportedly 10 states have basically signed off on these details. That leaves about 38 states outstanding. And it's not clear about whether the 3,400 or so, 34,000 rather, or so cities and communities and native reserves would basically have to sign off on that. In the meantime, Purdue has given a statement saying while Purdue Pharma is prepared to defend itself vigorously in the opioid litigation, the company has made it clear that it sees little good coming from years of wasteful litigation and appeals the people and communities affected by the opioid crisis need help now. And so we will be watching this as it unfolds.
We will indeed, very closely, and thank you for the latest, Carolyn. Carolyn Dunn, who is in Washington. Let's bring you the Canadian situation. A proposed class action lawsuit here now has the backing of provinces right across the country. Ontario has joined New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Quebec in going along with a national class action lawsuit that British Columbia is proposing. The aim, as in the U.S., to recoup from pharmaceutical companies the costs of dealing with the opioid crisis. Ontario's Attorney General has put out this statement. British Columbia is the proposed representative plaintiff in the proposed opioid costs recovery class action. Ontario supports this effort. We agree with British Columbia's Attorney General. We, too, are encouraged by the findings of the Oklahoma court and its determination that the defendants helped fuel the state's opioid crisis.